Good day, everyone. Richard Cowperthwait for Northwest Access TV. Thanks for joining us here. We've got a show. We're going to be talking a lot about Swanton Village and Highgate with my two guests. Next to me on my left, Heidi Britch-Valenta, the former Highgate Town Administrator, now the Grant Specialist and Project Coordinator. Am I pretty close to that for Swanton Village, Heidi?
I'll take it.
And I guess her new boss, Bill Sheets, the Swanton Village Manager. Thanks, folks, for the time, and thanks for your flexibility this morning, having just interviewed St. Albans Mayor Tim Smith. So a new job for you, Heidi. But boy, 11 years? I was way off on that one. I was thinking how long you had been
It is
Highgate's
a very
Administrator.
long time.
It's a long time.
It
and
is.
the average for that job is probably about, what, half of that? 5-6 years, maybe?
I can't say I know in
Yeah.
general. I would say for myself, 5 or 6 years is a long
Yeah.
time to stay in one spot.
So did you stay in that job, as you look back on it, probably more than a little bit longer than you would have expected? Was that, yeah?
That's correct. Longer than is typical for me.
Yeah.
I like to keep moving. I like to keep learning things, but it was a very interesting job, and I became very attached to projects. I think it was bittersweet leaving.
Yeah. You succeeded David Juscavage in that job?
That's correct.
And then David, of course, moved on, I guess moved on to Swanton Town Administrator after that, with Brian Savage having succeeded David a couple of years ago. Boy, so Highgate, a lot of things going on in Highgate. In fact, a vote in Highgate last week.
The vote passed.
That vote passed.
Yeah, that's a great step
On
forward.
a key village core issue.
Yes, indeed. So they will be able to finish their design for that village wastewater
Yeah.
system, and it should be noted that no one will be forced to get on that system. It'll be completely voluntary, and it's designed to serve that property for the businesses.
This is what the so-called the Mesha property is that?
It was the Meshi
Was
property
Meshi.
merged with a previously owned municipal property,
Okay.
and then a small segment that the school used to own.
Huh.
So it's a little over 2 acres, and the
And again-
committee is currently working at a new library design.
Yeah, and this would be basically a big leach field as just kind of a
Correct.
wastewater facility or wastewater issue.
Correct.
Which was basically needed for any growth, any kind of significant growth in the village area.
Yes, and I think that's a common issue in small villages.
Sure,
is
Highgate's
There's a
got
lot
plenty of
of
company with that.
well overlaps and isolation areas that really limit what could happen on that property. So that was the only way to go forward.
I should note that the former select board chair in Highgate, Sharon Bousquet, your successor as town administrator.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, interesting. That caught me by surprise. I interviewed Sharon a couple weeks ago, and I was glad that in a phone conversation setting up the interview, that subject happened to come up, and it didn't come up on the air when she might have told me, yeah, I happen to be the new administrator. I fortunately got that news on the phone before the show, but interesting. Well, Sharon's got a full plate. I suspect you're going to get a call or
It's a full
maybe a
plate.
call daily.
Yeah, it absolutely is, but she's been following along with those committees. So she already knows the vision, and so I think that she's going to be able to step in and carry those things forward.
Interesting. So, Billy, I guess your newest employee here for the village. Huh? What do you think? Think you made a good choice? We'll see.
Outstanding so far. I lost focus as soon as she said she likes to move around. Since your show,
Boy,
really
not sure how long you're going to have her.
Well, let's lock that in right now for the record. 5 to 7 year commitment. No, it's been, and I hope it's at least that. It's been a great addition to the team. We had an absolute void in our ability to seek out grants and run projects.
So this is a new position for the village?
It is our 39th employee, yes.
Wow. Number 39.
Yep.
And again, had this been talked? You haven't been village manager too long, but had this been talked about for a while to make a new position and find somebody for it, or when did this?
Yeah, not prior to my arrival. I think it was just an evaluation that I did with the trustees, and we identified with all of the things that we have going on, if we really want to keep the momentum moving forward, and most importantly, identify critical funding that's out there, we needed to identify a position. We were just super fortunate to have Heidi apply, and it was a no-brainer. She's knocked it out of the park from day one.
Interesting. So talk, and either of you, both of you, talk about your job. What's a typical day, or probably no typical day, but are grants, is that kind of the main thing, just going after whatever money you can find for the village, or?
No typical day, I would
Sure.
say that, and I think that.
Unlike Bill, I'm sure Bill, every day is typical for you.
Very
Bill,
easy,
right?
very easy.
Same stuff
No
every day.
typical
right?
days, I think that is the allure. That is
I bet.
what keeps that job interesting, is it could be completely different tomorrow, what you're doing, from what you're doing today.
Yes, I can say the
and
same
that
about
is-
reporting. It was nice to, yeah, none of my days over almost half a century were ever the same. I guess that's kind of good.
It is, if that's what you're interested in, and
Yeah.
it certainly is what I'm interested in. I'm amazed at what Swanton Village was able to do without a dedicated position for grant writing. So there were a lot of projects, and communities such as Swanton Village and Highgate definitely benefit so greatly from your former guest this morning, Tim Smith.
Yeah,
The Industrial Development Corps and the Regional Planning Commissions are just really critical to those towns making things happen. And I
Yeah.
know that they were able to get a lot of support for that previously and ongoing, so that, we can get at the table and grab some of that cash that's going to make each community a little stronger.
yeah. So is there a lot of money in terms of grants? Is there much less grant money these days than there used to be, or more, or I've got zero handle on that? Or do you know all the possible sources out there? Are there new sources to find out?
No, it's impossible to know all the sources
All right.
out there. There's so much more money than there was
Really?
previously
So there's a
available.
lot of potential bucks out there,
There are a lot of
really.
available pools of money.
And typically,
Yes.
some of these are 100% grants, or some are matching grants, or different kinds of grants, I assume?
It's a
or-
mix. It's a mix.
Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting.
It-
So without Heidi, Bill, this would be, some of your job doing this, or other staff, but it's nice to have a kind of a dedicated person doing this?
Yeah, it's really just trying to control your own destiny.
Yeah.
Heidi hit it exactly right. We have many outstanding partners. We continue to work with them. There were things, additional things that we could identify and move forward on with the assistance of a dedicated professional.
Yeah.
And that's what we have.
Interesting. ARPA money, has ARPA all been designated, or is there still some?
100% designated.
Okay, so you
Yes.
don't need Heidi to tell you where some of this ARPA money's going?
No, we really, the first $400,000 was for the purchase of 124 First Street next door for the, hopefully, the future public safety facility.
Huh.
That's
Right.
still very much in the infancy stages. We don't even have a total cost estimate, but we are continuing to work with a construction manager in REARC and with Weeman Lamphere Architects.
Huh.
So the additional money really was poured into the same project to fund the construction manager and the architectural assessment for the property.
So no, you don't have a set price tag on that at this point?
They are just barely starting
Really?
to identify what the cost would be for that location, and then we're currently housed in a very old 48-year-old building that looks fairly nice on the outside.
Yeah.
So, that's going to be an uphill battle for us to educate the public as to the fact that, yes, the outside does look reasonably okay.
Yeah.
The inside is extremely outdated, no space for the police, really, for anybody, any HVAC safety systems. There's a number of deficiencies, and we'll start to hold open houses for those, but the project will be to take the fire department and the police department, put them in a new facility next door on the new property, and then renovate completely the existing building.
Yeah.
That will afford us the ability to relocate Public Works where the fire department was, and for the electric department to expand.
Wow.
And when I say we're out of room now, when you park the trucks, you really have to wedge yourself in between even to gain access. So
Wow.
it's barely functional. We leave a lot of things out that we shouldn't, that should be protected. Much more functional if we are fortunate enough to have a successful bond vote in March of next year.
And that's what we're talking, that sounds pretty solid for next town meeting. village meeting?
Yeah, full credit to the trustees. These trustees, they have the courage to take things to the voter. It's going to be up to the voters, the will of the voters and their support. But all I can ask as an employee of the trustees is that they have the courage to take that to the voters, and they're 100% behind that.
Interesting. I know Swanton Town, talking to Earl Fournier, the Swanton Select Board Chair, and I think they're giving a little thought, and again, the rec center, community center project, one of the big issues, probably the biggest issue on their plate. But I've asked her, what about, seeking voter approval for an LOT, local option tax, which of course St. Albans City and town have done a few years ago, and funding all kinds of things, new town hall, a pool, whatever. And he said, yeah, we're talking about that a bit. If that were to happen, Swanton Village obviously would get a cut of that. Do you know if it is?
I think we would have to, both governance structures would have to support that.
Yeah.
And then you would, in all likelihood, of course, the state of Vermont, when they set it up, and it takes some time.
It takes about 30% of it.
30%.
Something tells me that percentage might be going up one of these years, the way the state's going.
It could be, and then I would assume, because there's no way to differentiate for online sales, the zip codes are the same, that you would take the grand list, you would take a percentage of that grand list, and you would divvy up the local option tax that way. So I've heard it discussed, nothing firm at this point.
Right.
It's really up to those governance structures
Sure.
to do it, but 53 other communities in Vermont are doing it
Is that what
actively
it
right
is?
now,
Interesting.
and it is a good funding source.
Yeah. So the public safety facility, sounds like that's pretty much on the top of your list for big projects, Bill, for Swanton Village at this point in the future?
Yeah, it's all timing, and
Yeah.
we were fortunate enough to get the facility, the land next door, and the timing is right. When I say that our current police facility is housed in an area that is
Wow.
not much bigger than the room that we're in right now.
Yeah.
It is substandard in so many ways. It
Yeah.
wouldn't even come close to meeting accreditation standards.
Of course, no
anybody.
holding cell or anything like that, right?
No Sally Port to drive in with somebody who's unruly. That becomes unsafe. There's no holding cell. There's no space. There's really no ability to store evidence in an environment
Wow.
that allows you to expand and grow. We really look forward to doing open houses, and we'll do these individually for small groups. We'll do them during the day, nighttime, weekend, anything to demonstrate to the public how woefully inadequate our current facilities are, and then expand upon that. Not only are they inadequate for right now, there is a call and a fever pitch right now for regionalized policing
Right.
that we are going to be smack in the middle of, and we should be in the middle of, and that's going to start taking off. And we can't even begin to have those conversations for our neighboring communities
Right.
if we do not get a new facility.
Right. Boy, I think the last time I was in the Swanton Village PD, not for any nefarious reasons, was when Chief Mike McCarthy was here. But yeah, it's just an incredibly small space.
It has not changed.
Yeah, it hasn't gotten bigger somehow.
It has not.
Interesting. Swanton Village PD, I think when I last spoke with you, you were saying it's the only fully staffed PD in the state. Is that a?
Yeah, it remains so. And I
Yeah.
know that, and it's not disingenuous. We have a staff of 8, but Vermont is made up of, it's over 50 still full-time professional law enforcement organizations
All right.
of varying sizes, and 8 is not as small as people think. So
Huh.
we currently do have 8 full-time professionals, 8 part-time.
Huh.
And the good news is, it's all attributable to Matt Sullivan's leadership as the chief.
Huh.
He comes in with a credibility, and then he has demonstrated over his brief time still there, those leadership skills. And he has had deliverables that are being noticed by the law enforcement community. And when I say we could staff up pretty quickly, there are people regularly that are full-time certified in other organizations that are knocking on our door seeking employment.
Really? Wow.
So we have no vacancies, but
Huh.
we would be in an ideal position to ramp up for regionalized policing if the need arises.
Interesting. Yeah, you've talked about that before. Is that getting attention just in recent years? I don't recall even hearing that term maybe even a couple of years ago.
It's
And of
actually a
course, you've got
term
your
that...
state- You've got your big state police background, of course.
Yeah, it's been around for 25 years.
Really?
And the
Interesting.
concept was always there, and, I'm not speaking on behalf of the state police, but the state police have 60 vacancies.
Wow.
Even when fully staffed, I personally, as a leader in the state police, have testified multiple times that
You could have used a ton more people than
Well,
even fully staffed.
not even, yes, but we support, the state police support it's an
Yeah.
old habit.
Yeah.
Towns and communities like this town in Swanton Village, Highgate, anybody over a certain population
Having their own PD.
having their own
Sorry.
PD. And, it's pains me to say it, the level of service that you're going to get from my beloved state police for free
Yeah.
is not the quality of service that a community deserves.
Yeah.
You're going to get those emergency services, homicides, special teams. There's no need for the Swanton PD to ever consider having a scuba team, a bomb squad,
Right.
a full-level SWAT team. That's what the state police is there for support. But the community deserves a much more comprehensive level of policing services.
Yeah.
And that can only be done if you make the commitment internally.
So stay tuned on regionalization of policing.
Yeah, there's, it's no secret. We are getting requests, informal, of course, for just discussions about what things would look like, but those queries are coming from the town of Swanton, who currently just do a contract for us, 8 hours a day, 5 p.m. to 1 a.m.
Interesting.
And it just leads to confusion. State police cover the other sections. The citizens candidly don't really know who to call. The many days I start my day by somebody being in our lobby complaining about our police when in fact it's not even our hours of coverage.
Really? In the town you're talking about?
Correct. And that's very confusing for folks.
So what happens if something's going on in Swanton Town, which obviously happens outside of those 8 hours?
Sure.
Do you folks get a call, the state police?
No,
or
it's state police.
So state police?
Yes.
So
Yep.
if it's outside those hours, you won't deal with the situation, or?
Well, if it's an
depending-
emergency, any life safety issue, of course.
Right,
There's
obviously.
no contract, nothing stands in the way of our
Sure.
ability to provide that level of service
Right,
to any community. And,
Right.
and we do that on a regular basis.
right,
But for the routine calls,
yeah,
and many of which, to add to the frustration, again, there's no blame on behalf of the Vermont State Police. When you have
Yeah.
60 vacancies across the
Wow.
board, you can provide minimal services.
wow,
So they're answering the phone, and they're declining to respond to many incidents
Yeah.
that the citizens have come to expect a response of.
yeah,
And then that, unfortunately, causes more confusion, and often that is directed at the Swanton Police Department until you explain what the situation is.
interesting. What St. Albans Barracks, what should the St. Albans Barracks fully staffed would be? How many uniformed officers? 13, 14, or is that a crazy number I'm throwing out?
It's more than that.
More than that?
It's more than that. It's slightly more than that.
And
That
they're
includes,
down like everybody else, I assume.
I'm not even sure. I can't speak to their current staffing level at that location, but across
Probably.
the state, they're down.
Wow.
And, that includes their sergeants, so their first line leaders, their supervisors, their lieutenants. But generally,
Huh.
you would expect some of the larger barracks, Westminster and St. Albans and Rutland,
Yeah.
to have more than 20 people assigned.
Wow.
Pretty sure that's not the case now.
Yeah. Interesting. Your chief, Matt Sullivan, is he tied into office work all day? Does he get out and about? Is he able to or want to do any shifts out and about town?
He is forced to be out and about.
He's forced to.
So, and that's the other problem, is you really have to demonstrate, and it's hard to do. You only know what you know, and you have to staff to support training, to support days off,
Yeah.
all of those things. So there's times when, whether he likes it or not, he's the chief, but he's the only person working.
Really?
So or if he's one of two working, any calls for service you're going to respond to. So he has evolved exceptionally well compared to, you don't have to respond to much as the number 2 at the Burlington PD.
Yeah.
I never had to respond to anything as the number 2 in the Vermont State Police.
Huh.
So it's, other than to manage high-level critical incidents that are emerging
Yeah.
threats. But Yeah, he's made that evolution, he's embraced it, and that goes a long way toward
Yeah.
his demonstration of his leadership skills. That's why you see people knocking on the door. They want to be part of the team.
Yeah. Interesting. Heidi, you probably don't have to deal with police issues too much, huh? With all the other stuff you're dealing with, or am I wrong? Are you after, well, I guess I shouldn't say that. I can only assume you're probably after some grant money to help out with the public safety
Absolutely.
facility. In
Absolutely,
fact, maybe
but
that's one of your higher priorities.
from my former days in Highgate and my residence in Berkshire, Enosburg area, the policing issue is just something that every family is thinking about.
And of course, in the case of Berkshire, and I guess Enosburg too, Enosburg, of course, has no contract now, I don't think, with Sheriff's Department, or am I? Does it go?
I don't
Not
want to
even
speak
sure.
for Enosburg, but I'm
Berkshire certainly
seeing
doesn't.
the
Berkshire's
sheriff's.
just state police coverage, whatever
That's right.
coverage you can get.
That is right, zero coverage, and, it's a precarious spot to
Yeah.
be. So the regional issue, and I think early in my tenure in Highgate, I attended a meeting with the state police and sheriff talking about regional policing.
Yeah.
It was an idea that people were thinking about 11 years ago, as Bill said, much further back than that, but I think there's been enough issues that have come up of late that people are thinking again, how do we do this efficiently? How do we get the most bang for our buck and the best service that we possibly can to keep our families safe? And it's I think it's going to be an issue that has to be dealt with in the next decade. Like, something's going to have to shift for communities.
Yeah. Can you give me a picture again, the regional policing? Were you talking maybe in the future, like one Franklin County Police Department or something with different substations around, or can you give me any?
That's the beauty of this. So you got to recognize, accept local control. So some communities may say internally at the governance level or in a poll to the voters, hey, we're good with the state police, and we don't want to impact our taxes. Other communities are going to reach out. So I think it depends on capability and capacity of that respective organization. So Chief Mo Lamoth and their relationship with the city and St. Albans town, they're full steam ahead. They're kind of the roadmap. They're the model for what we would replicate.
With, of course, City PD regaining control of coverage in St. Albans town just a little less than a year down the road now.
Right, and so their challenge is ramping up, hiring enough officers. A roadmap for us would look something like this: a successful bond vote while the new facility is being built. You capitalize on that delay and communicate. So, for example, let's use the town of Swanton. So if the town of Swanton wanted to replicate the coverage from, say, 6 a.m. to 2 a.m. across the board, that would require essentially doubling the size of our organization to 16 full-time, going from a budget of approximately $1 million to $2 million. You could then, and that would happen in 2025, early 2026. You could then say whatever continuous community wants to reach out for either entity. So you could say Highgate. Highgate could make a phone call and say, what does it look like for us? And they would then have time to take it to the voters. What you need is voter approval, similar to what St. Albans Town did, where people are locking in for 10 years. What you can't do, you cannot double the size of your agency in good faith, have a change in a select board, and 3 years later, have them call you up and say, we're all done next year. Because that's really bad business practice to then look at your 5 or 6 most recent hires and say, thank you for your service, but we no longer can utilize you. So it has to be a sustainable model. If it's a 10-year contract, 7 years in, if a community gives you a heads up that in 3 years they're going to part ways, that gives you more than enough time to engage the desire of other communities. They're absolutely requesting these types of services. When you start adding a third and additional community, so say Highgate came on in 2026, You then wouldn't have to triple, you wouldn't have to, again, that's where you would start to see your efficiencies in patrol areas, the sharing of cruisers, the structure, the facilities. You would then start seeing a leveling out and actually a decrease in the cost to taxpayers if you do this efficiently and effectively.
Interesting. Highgate, of course, gets coverage now, obviously part-time coverage from St. Albans City.
Yes.
And I guess they re-upped, for another one year.
Yes. Well, I think that the future of that is very questionable,
Yeah.
if St. Albans would be able to continue that.
But I
So
guess they're locked in for the next, for this year, the fiscal year starting July 1st, or am I wrong about that?
I think it was on the table. I can't say as I'm
Okay.
up to speed on where that actually
I
landed.
think it's for another year.
It was quite likely.
How many hours a week, Heidi, at least when you were administrator, were you getting from St. Albans City? No?
Well, I wouldn't want to say too much about
Okay.
that, but it was far less than what is prudent.
Yeah, I'm sure.
It's an expensive endeavor for a small town to try and sub that. So the collaboration piece that Bill was mentioning is where that becomes more feasible
Yeah.
to expand the hours. I would say that they were shooting for as much as they could possibly afford.
Yeah. Swanton Village, you had no interest when, I guess, the contract came up in Highgate, Bill? Did you look into that? No, you didn't apply, you didn't try to get that Highgate part-time contract, did you?
No, we were approached, and
You were
we've been approached
approached.
by multiple towns.
There are
and,
other towns too.
Right. Without
Interesting.
expanding properly, it's a capacity
Right.
issue.
Yeah.
And we must adhere to kind of the rules of engagement, which are take care of your own community first.
Yeah.
Those are the taxpayers, those are the demands. So right now, currently, that's the village plus 8 hours in the town.
Yeah.
And that's it for capacity
Yeah.
until we build the organization, and then we could do that outreach. So we would prefer that growth be kind of an all-in approach from other communities
Yeah.
over a 10-year period where you can kind of plan for that.
Yeah. Heidi, let's flash back to Highgate. So 11 years. What are some of the accomplishments? What do you look back fondly? What do you think yourself and staff in the town, has Highgate changed? Is it a much different town, would you say, now than when you first started as administrator?
Yes and no.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely there's some change. The arena, upgrading the arena was the first really big project.
Yeah.
Involved a lot of community input and took a great effort to pass that bond, make that happen. Because again, people are always struggling with their tax bills, their property tax bills. So, but Highgate was lucky enough to have a committed core of volunteers that came forward and said, we're going to run this arena. We're going to make this happen. This is important to the community. We started looking at the impact that arena had on households and on families and on, just the outcome of some children that were getting a lot of their mentoringship through the arena. And it became something that the community felt they needed to do. So it was a really inspiring time. So that crew, Maha representatives, ran the arena with their volunteer hours
Yeah.
for at least 3 years to save
Wow.
that arena.
Oh.
And the community then said, this is a real thing. This is important. And they backed it, and we completed that, and it is a well-used building. It is round the clock, and they have upped their game a lot about what they're offering, and they've joined the legion of other towns that are offering free concerts and movie nights, and really it's just nice to see that a family could see a free concert just about any night of the week that they wanted in this community. It's beautiful, vibrant, things going on.
Yeah, I did
So-
some skating in there, in the snack bar. I can't say enough about that. I love the snack bar.
It's so funny. Every time a contractor or a consultant or anyone came to Highgate to see the arena, they're like, best fries in the state,
That's
without a
great
question.
snack bar.
And it's the lovely family that's run it for years. They're hand cutting potatoes
Wow.
and making those fries that are really quite popular throughout the
So that's
state.
been a big thing. And so again, the future of the arena was real in doubt. I
It
recall
was
some
very
of those stories.
much in doubt. It was a consideration on the table to close that,
Yeah.
rent it out to a business. And it was, as you know, we tried to collaborate with Swanton, considered an
That's right,
intermunicipal
forgot
agreement.
that.
There was a
Wouldn't
lot
do it.
of different roads they went down, and they finally just said,
Right.
it's ours, we
Yeah.
need to manage it, and they're doing a great job of managing it. So it's a beautiful community story that's there, and it is a benefit to all the communities surrounding it. St. Albans even has teams that rent hours in Highgate because it
Yeah.
can't, there's just not enough time
Yeah.
in St. Albans, and Milton also. So it is a regional asset,
Yeah. it was,
managed completely by Highgate. It was one of the really lovely projects that I started out with. And there's been an overhaul of the municipal complex, which was very much needed. We were kind of in the same position Swanton Village is.
I'm sure you were sorry to miss out on the flooring work that's been going on.
Oh, I was so relieved that it,
Good timing. So did you
but what a
purposely
great
depart
project.
from-
Yeah, that's it. That's why I left. It's because of the flooring project solely. But went through a universal access study to look for ADA improvements. And it was all paid through for the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, which they do for all communities. And then they funded ADA improvements for us, and we were able to gain some efficiencies by relocating some underutilized spaces, and we redid the floor in the fire department because there was cracks, and really brought the building forward, and the flooring was one of the last pieces of that, just really making it a very functional and attractive building. That's why I think that's one of the nicest meeting rooms around. It's got a real character, and I think it reflects well on the community that they did that.
Yeah. Village core issues, how long? I'm not thinking, I don't remember hearing village core issues too many years ago, but has that been kind of around for a while? Was that there since day one of your tenure?
Well, the conversation prior to 2017 was about how unfortunate it is we have a blighted property in our village center. What can we do? And there was very little that could be done. And then when the owner passed and the property came up for sale, another time the community really made a great decision to invest in their village center. So they approved the purchase of that in 2017. And since that time, another dedicated corps of volunteers has spent countless hours looking at each of the levels of review and each of the details involved in revitalizing a property, going through Browns fields and going through environmental assessments and looking at potential uses. And Highgate has spent that much time doing that, and they've done it very efficiently. They've utilized almost entirely grant funding to get where they are now, and they're still working with 2 grants to create a new library design. And they're going that route because they've heard from the community in several instances that they need a new library. And one of them was when we did our community visit. And
Vermont Council on Rural Development.
yes, and part of the final ranking process ranked the library at the top of people's desires. And so they are moving forward with a final design. And now that the wastewater purchase is in place and they can bring the wastewater construction to the voters, the library will be the first piece of construction that happens on that property. So it's a really, really great community project that those Village Core Master Plan Committee members have been around a table
Yeah.
many, many hours to make all of that happen. It's
Yeah, I've had
really-
a couple shows interviewing Sharon Bousquet, the new town administrator, and Rebecca Manning, who's been a key part of that
Yes.
group. But well, I'm a
Absolutely.
library guy. I'm not a Highgate resident, but yeah, it sounds like you can really make the case for a new library. And it sounds like Highgate's done very well with its library, and they're quick to say in community center, don't just call it a library, but boy, pretty small
Yes.
space.
Thank you for saying
What-
that.
what big
I
vault
would
is
get
that?
in
What's in
trouble.
the middle? Is that the vault or something right in the middle of it in its small building? I mean, just the building itself, it's not what little.
The historic building?
No, I'm just talking about the library. But is there something right in
Oh,
if
there's
you're-
yes, it was the former town clerk's office, and there is a huge vault
the old
in the
vault,
middle that
yeah.
is
It's been a while
really
since I've been in there.
unusable space, so there's
Yeah.
a lot of storage in there, but the area, the usable area
Yeah.
for programming is very small, smaller
they do
than a
some-
mobile home. I would say
Wow.
600 or 700 square feet is
I
what
think
they
they said
have for
capacity of
space.
about
Wow.
40
It is
people or something.
Very, very, very tiny, and they
Yeah.
just sustained some flood damage this winter, not external flooding, but when it was so cold, a
Wow.
radiator broke and flooded
Wow.
the basement, and so it's a very old building that is not serving the town well, and it's really, I'm thankful that you brought up the community center piece,
Yeah.
because that is something that when we were going through charrettes to try and understand what the community wanted to see there, their priorities were a place they could gather, a place they could have a bite to eat,
Yeah.
see their neighbors. It wasn't just that they wanted a library. It was that they needed a space that they could gather.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably common in most towns, is that that's why those public concerts are so nice, because you see your neighbors. Well, we bumped into you there the other night.
Yeah.
It is a gift to be able to have that, and that's a big part of why the new library is being supported.
Yeah, no, a lot of stuff going on, or potential stuff in Highgate. Bill, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about relicensing of the hydro plant, Normandy Croft generating facility. I'm sure you don't spend any time on that. How are you faring with that? And it sounded like as we've talked before, it sounds like the state's kind of the tougher, or the more, I don't know, involved, difficult folks to deal with, and the feds are more involved folks. But anyway, how are you faring?
They're both onerous
Yeah.
processes. So we, again, our FERC license expires in April of next year.
No.
We are on track to hopefully be fully considered for relicensing up to that point. It is not uncommon. In fact, it's very common to not receive your relicensing on
Right.
time, and then you just operate on your past license.
It's not like they shut you down or anything.
No, they don't. They certainly do not do
Better
that.
not do
It's so there is a back and forth right now of various studies, whether they're related to the environment, biological, a series of studies on the impact of the hydroelectric dam and what it does downstream, upstream, and in between. And the state of the state is we are right now answering any follow-up questions they have. So they often come back with areas for additional information. So we're in the process of utilizing our FERC attorney to answer those legal questions. And programmatically, internally, we're answering all of the other questions. And that back and forth continues, while at the same time, we're having a dialogue with Vermont A&R for the the permit that we need that follows the relicensing, but you have to have those concurrently.
And what's that permit?
It's a permit, it's a run a river, you have to have a water permit,
Really?
401 permit to actually meet state standards.
Really?
So that then is, let's call it complementary, but some, not competing, but some diverse studies that maybe one or the other do not require. So anytime they identify a data gap, they ask for additional information, additional research, additional studies. So those are all cost. We're hopeful. We're hopeful that we're going to meet all of the requirements, and we want to be stewards of the environment. I don't want to come off like we don't support the structure that's there.
Yeah.
We want to come to some type of reasonable conclusion where we can operate very close to how we operate right now for the next X number of years.
Yeah. And you're generating what percentage of the power that Swanton Village Electric and your customers use? I mean, pretty good-
It depends on peaking, but
Obviously.
between 60 and 80%. It's 100% renewable energy. We rely on our ability to do a lot of that peaking so that we don't have to go out on the market, which is much like a bond market, and purchase power during peak times, which is incredibly expensive. In fact, there are months where we don't have to do purchase power at all, and all we do is we become the vendor, and that goes out into the market, and other folks purchase our power.
Interesting.
And instead of paying, we get a beautiful large check from VEPSA, there's 13 municipalities that are involved with VEPSA, Vermont
Public Power Supply Authority.
And they do a lot of the stuff for us in terms of purchase power and legal. And
Yeah.
so it's a layered approach where we're on track, but hopefully we don't have the same delays as our friends in Morrisville, who are 5 to 6 years behind.
Is that right?
Enosburg. who are
Enosburg
about
Fall, they're going through this too, right?
They're going through it now. They're just ahead of us. So we're collaborating. We're learning a lot. We're all members of VEPSA, and you learn from each other. And again, we hope to come to some type of an agreement where we become relicensed. We get all the necessary permits to operate in the state of Vermont, and we're good for another 30 years.
I was going to ask you, another 30 years is what that's good
Yeah.
for?
Yep.
Interesting. And as we've talked before, there are those in state government who would love for you folks to remove the Lower Village Dam. Have I got the name right for the?
Yeah, the
dam?
lower Swanton Dam.
Lower Swanton Dam.
There are certainly entities that would. It's probably number one on their list.
Right, really, in the state?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's a top priority.
Wow.
Yeah.
But that's the last thing you folks, absolutely something you don't want to do or don't intend to do.
Well, I'm Switzerland. I'm neutral. I listen
Yeah.
to all parties, but I
Yeah.
work for the trustees, and at this current point, the trustees.
I guess I should say the trustees have want to keep this dam. They seem
That's
to have
correct.
zero interest in getting rid of this dam.
That's correct. Yes.
Interesting. Heidi, you get involved in the relicensing at all, or is that one of the issues?
No, I do not.
You don't, if that's too,
I
I'm sure
have
that.
not dipped my toe into that at all. I attended one meeting while I was in Highgate
Yeah.
to represent Highgate at this, and Highgate is very fond of the dam, and
For which obviously the town gets some pretty good buckos, I assume.
that is
Yes.
correct.
Yeah.
Plus, it is a lovely tourist attraction when it's coupled with the lenticular truss bridge
Yeah.
right there. It's very.
Boy, really, in fact, I can't believe I haven't done that in the last couple of weeks. Taking a walk over the bridge there down
It was a very popular
incredible.
spot.
It's
I can't believe I haven't done
Yeah.
that now that I think about
Yeah.
it. I trust you've been making some money. You've been generating some electricity the last few weeks, I assume.
We have. When it gets so high, actually, you've got to minimize some of your
Oh, is that
output
right?
just because of the high water levels. But yeah, we have been, this is a record July for us. We've surpassed
Really?
all of last July
Wow.
as of a week ago.
Really?
And we're going to go back and research the records. We believe this will
Wow.
be a record July of all time for us in
Interesting.
terms of generation.
Well, I guess I can believe it. And Lake Champlain, again, we're taping this show on Tuesday, July 25th. One of the TV weather folks mentioned yesterday, July 24th, was Lake Champlain. Lake level was a record high for July 24th at about 98.7 feet, up almost 3 feet with the recent rains and flooding, which is incredible to me. I know Lake Champlain pretty well, but for that big a lake to go up 3 feet in midsummer is obviously
Massive amount.
Yeah, not too surprising. Some of the flooding was so bad.
Right.
And I forget if we talked on air or off air about the flooding, but Franklin County largely spared any issues in Swanton on the flooding?
We were very fortunate. The usual impacts to stormwater overflows, but negligible damage, no long-lasting damage.
Wow.
Of course, Foundry Street is one of our areas that are it's flood-prone.
Right.
So right near our wastewater treatment facility substation there, we had to close the road, no access to the river for the boat access, but knock on wood, as of right now, no long-term damage.
Wow, what a break.
Yes.
Boy, it's painful, again, just watching especially TV news and seeing coverage every day is, boy, Montpelier, Johnson, Okemo, name your places, but boy, what a hit for Montauk.
Right.
Yeah, no, Franklin County seemed to be very, very lucky. Heidi, again, you're grant specialist and project coordinator. You want to talk, and got some good projects going. You want to talk about your project coordinator part of your job?
There are many projects.
Really? You got a few projects going on?
Absolutely, yes. So I stepped into several things that were ongoing, and one of them that I think anyone who drives through Swanton Village would appreciate. It's a complex intersection at a couple points. And there was a lot of work before I arrived to really dig into the details of what could happen there to make it a better flow and a safer, more attractive area. So there is a large grant right now to try to chip away at that big picture and focus on a few little projects. So we are starting that this summer and looking at making some improvements to the intersection with Canada Street and Grand Avenue, right at Merchants Row. It's that's kind of a tense area to travel through in a vehicle. So on a bicycle or on foot, it's even more challenging. So hopefully some of those modifications will make the downtown a little more attractive and safer. And then we'll be seeking out some more funding to really look at the big plan and see what we can tackle next.
Yeah. So Grant, there are just, hundreds, thousands of potential sources out there? Are there, when you're after grants, how do you even go about that?
It can be a little overwhelming at times, but I think the state has been putting a focus on villages for at least a decade, where they've really said, everyone gets in their car and they drive somewhere. What if they could get things in their own community? What if they could have a community center where they could sit and talk with their neighbors? And that's the sort of projects that the state has really been championing for quite a long time. And then when ARPA funding arrived on the scene, they really looked to little towns and said, if you've been wanting to do something, let us give you a leg up on this. And then for the villages and the larger towns, it's an opportunity to make some improvements that you could only really dream about before, and there is a lot of funding available. The challenge is, as Bill said, you've got to have the capacity to manage them, and you've got to have a little bit of skill in managing them too. So I think that's where many little towns are right now. It's like, should we hire someone to help us with this and try?
Didn't state officials recently make a point going around, or maybe they've been doing it for a while, different parts, especially more rural parts of the state, and trying to give folks some help with kind of with that. Hey, there's money out there. We realize you have little or no staff, but trying to give some help to maybe some of the smaller communities in particular.
Absolutely, and to come and see what's...
Did they log some time in Swan?
Yes,
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
came to Swan Village, and there was a wonderful showing of the community and representatives from the state. We're very lucky to have the administration that is so supportive
Yeah.
of all these projects, and we were very much also looking forward to the governor's rail trail ride, which
Right.
unfortunately had to be canceled, but what a thing to celebrate.
Yeah. Boy, it sounds like LVRT, Lamoille Valley Rail Trail, in places took a real hit. Sounds like it's going to be maybe a good while before that's fully repaired. And
Yeah.
It was a
will be.
cruel twist, for sure.
I guess Missisquoi Valley Rail Trail here in Franklin County, I guess that survived okay.
Yep.
But yeah, that was unfortunate. The governor was going to bike from Swanton to St. Jay is 93 miles?
93 miles, yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
But again, LVRT, Lamoille Valley Rail Trail, sure seems like a great resource from which Swanton should certainly get some benefit.
Oh, undoubtedly.
Yeah.
And it's all, and Heidi emphasized it, a further point on that tour. So Economic Development, Commerce, Secretary of Commerce, they came up and they did a tour. Not only did they do a tour and offer help, they reached out for us a couple days later
Yeah.
with 3 or 4 experts that actually revisited areas on the tour that we pointed out where we needed assistance and pointed us in the right direction.
What were some of those areas out of curiosity?
Wastewater treatment.
Okay.
So we will be, while we're in the queue, we won't know for a little while, but as you know, we've talked about it in past shows,
Yeah.
we are going to look for a November bond vote on an amount to be determined, but we
Yeah.
have a significant upgrade of our wastewater treatment facility.
Yeah.
So we identified a need there. Heidi diligently worked on an application. We're looking for $1 million. So
Wow.
that's no strings attached.
Yeah.
That's for a critical need, and that is significant, where the state of Vermont supports you to that level where they say, hey, we are going to do a 4th round of this funding.
Wow.
It seems like the project you talked about on this tour will fit this nicely. We encourage you to apply.
So that was new information. You weren't aware of that before that visit?
That is correct.
Wow.
Yep.
Interesting.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. They
Yeah.
also, they have a few people that are just monitoring funding pools,
Right.
state and nationally, and reaching out. And they recently reached out to us about an energy grant that we were able to submit an application for, that I had not heard about that. I was not, I'm not exactly familiar with all of Swanton Village's needs yet, and I didn't even know, but when when it came to the table, the electric department had a desire to improve some transmission lines. And so it was a great fit. So here they are just reaching out and saying, could this be of any help? And then offering support to get you to the finish line. So it's a good system.
This is a great example, and I've talked about this on the show before. I've been humbled and honored to have various positions of leadership in state government with great teams. I will stack the team that we have of 39 professionals up against anybody.
Yeah.
But this is an example where we identified a gap and the ability to identify grant funding and seek it and then do projects. We're not guaranteed by any means to even make it to round 2, but this is a multi-million-dollar project that we had our sights on to relocate a cross-country line, because we know when you run cross-country power, susceptible, not sustainable outages, and we know these storms are increasing in frequency. So we're talking about the Carter Hill line up to the Highgate border, part of which is a shared transmission line with Velco, who support our concept and our project. If we get this is our ability to do this at millions of dollars at no taxpayer impact.
That's
So
significant.
it's massive.
Yeah.
So you're already adding up the things that we were not aware of before, just based upon a lack of capacity. We have the capability,
Yeah.
it just becomes a capacity issue. And when you have somebody dedicated that will go out and identify these, and as soon as the partners know that you have somebody dedicated, they start reaching out for you to say, are you aware of this opportunity, or are you aware of this one? So in a short time, we are in the queue for approximately $5 million in grants right now that we were not in the queue for just 6 months ago.
Wow, interesting.
It's massive.
Isn't Velco's doing some work on transmission lines from what, the converter station in Highgate south? some-
Yes, separate project, yes.
Totally separate
Yes,
project?
yep, yes.
Interesting. Let's talk, it was about a year ago, I think, Heidi, was it a July vote in Highgate when voters approved the bond for extending water and sewer lines from MVU to the airport, right? Highgate voters approved a bond for that. I think it was about a year ago. How, and it's funny, I've got a good friend who I won't identify, but saw over the weekend for the first time. And this is someone who has a pretty good feel for aviation, and it's funny, he asked me about the Franklin County State Airport infrastructure project and basically said, Richard, you buying what they're telling you about that? About how potentially in years in the future this could be a big thing? I said, yeah, I guess. And he just wasn't buying it for a second. And I said, what about, aren't they talking about like FedEx planes, stuff like, planes like that landing there? He says, not going to happen. I assume you're a big supporter of it, and I respect his viewpoint, but I hadn't heard from someone who I think kind of knows what he's talking about, such a negative commentary on that. You still pretty high on the airport project, Bill? You still see that as having a lot of future?
100%. And
Yeah.
you hear about it, and you hear it from a whole variety of people, and I respect all the skepticism and people's rights to have their opinion.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's going to be a major air FedEx facility, but we know it's going to be something. And it's going to be something that's going to increase our economic development. It's going to have all the things that any community wants. Vibrant jobs, hopefully an increase in housing, other economic things that we desperately need. You're going to see then the restaurants come and the additional businesses. And it's just all of the spokes, the recreation, everything we need is dependent upon those other components. And I think this is a vital component for the entire area for economic development.
And speaking of extending the water and sewer lines, is that work underway or starting soon, or what's?
Let's go with starting soon.
Starting soon, but definitely this summer or calendar year anyway, or not definitely?
I have learned already in these 6 months and for 30 years in state government to not commit to right away because it is a process and it's a lengthy process. So I'll defer on this one from your Highgate background.
I think soon is an excellent answer.
There are more permits? No, is there more kind of?
There are always more permits, yes. So permitting is tough under the best of circumstances.
Right.
And again, we're looking at a time where every town is doing projects, every community. So the permitting process is more challenging now than it has been in the past. And then with recent events, the state's focus has shifted away from, okay, economic development is great, but let's put out this fire right now. So their focus is elsewhere. So permits are taking longer than they have in the past. And there are other easements involved, and easements can always be a complicated situation. So it appears that the project is at the end of the permitting and easement cycle, and after that it will be going out to bid. So when that happens is unknown, but there's great progress that has been made. Highgate and Swanton Village are both very committed to the project and both very confident in the long-term payback for not just those two municipalities, but for the surrounding communities, the region, I would dare say. And when we started looking at that project, there were a few factors that were like, this might be the time to make this happen. And then as we got deeper into it, there were more positive indicators that kept coming onto the scene. It was, the upgrade of the interstate from Montreal to the Highgate border.
Yeah, I look forward to that for sure. A lot of
The
people-
upgrade of the border, the creation of a new welcome center in our area,
Yeah.
the creation of an economic development office in Montreal.
Yeah, we're just about out of time, unfortunately, but
So, a lot of confidence in the project, and I think it's a brilliant move for the region to support it the way they have.
well, I guess we're going to give Heidi the last word. Sorry I didn't give you a chance for a final comment, but thanks for covering a lot of ground. Again, Bill Sheets, the Swanton Village Manager, and Heidi Britch-Valenta, the Swanton Village's Grant Specialist and Project Coordinator. Thanks for the time. Good luck with all the projects. A lot of work to do. A lot of good stuff happening, though.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much,
And thanks to,
Richard.
I think, still producer Alan out there, or Paul. I'm Richard Cowperthwait. Thanks a lot for watching us here on Northwest Access TV. See you next time.